Isaac, maybe you could sketch the situation there, explain to us what the government is doing. We saw a bit of it in the video, what the government is doing to prevent the, what is it now, 300 million, 500 million, how many Chinese are actually active online, blogging, twittering, posting?
Yeah, definitely. It's a long story of censorship history in China. And with the uprising of the internet users, I mean, we call it netizen. It's the internet citizen that they are trying to express online, trying to share content online, including those talking about social issues and the political systems. But the censorship system, they are getting smarter and smarter as well. We can call it censorship 2.0 because it's not only related to technology. We call it Great Firewall System to block people from accessing Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. It's a long list of websites around the world, adding the very deep censoring of those keywords. Whenever you access a website, a web page with those keywords hitting, it will be turned into blank page. So it's very interesting phenomenon if you travel China, go hotel and open your laptop to connect the internet. The speed is okay, but you will hit many blank pages like this. And it's not only technical, there are many monitors, around you. If you go to internet cafe, if you use your landline to connect internet, broadband, your IP addresses will be always recorded. Whenever you publish something, your information will be definitely traced back to your home and where you are. And then there's also some, we call it 50 cents party, is the government guided human resources to pollute the internet content, to put noises to try to distract people's attentions on those, talkings about some real issues. So all these methods, work together to stop people's trying to be mobilized, trying to collaborate, talk each other. This kind of, it's a kind of hurdle, but it's still very much, going to an effectiveness, slowly, because many young people, they are creating new ways to share information online, to well use the social networks, to use joking ways, creative works like pictures, cartoons, etc., to spread out the information.
Because those can't be filters, those can't be
It's not so easy. To censors, definitely give them burdens and hard works to try to find out which piece of content, maybe 140 words, characters, is dangerous to the government is something very hard to judge, for those censor teams. Yeah.
Okay. So, Arash, in Iran, we know, having talked earlier and much reading the situation, that Iran is also learning from China.
Absolutely.
And many of the practices we see in China are already being employed in Iran. What is the situation like in Iran? In the film, we saw this new network, the internet, the halal network that they're trying to set up. What is the government doing in Iran right now to prevent that free access of information?
Sure. To go into this discussion, I think one way to get here is to just go through a bit of very brief introduction. Number one, the matter of fact is when internet came to Iran and was something that people could use, a lot of people actually started blogging, started using all the Orkut was a social network which was available back at the time, and then when other social networks came in, people started using them. And in the media landscape of Iran, which is very much state-controlled, this was a new phenomenon and is a new phenomenon. And so the state also knows that and wants to have their hands on it, and that's exactly where it gets to the halal internet or the clean internet and all the other names which are given to it, which are essentially a closed-off, sealed-off internet that content in it can be traced and tracked, and monitoring sort of criteria can be implemented quite easily, rather than content really flowing easily and sort of caps on it being hard to put.
But is that realistic, that they can actually block down, clamp down on an entire internet community?
We can look at that question from a number of perspectives. Number one, technically speaking, yes, you can do that. You can have an internet. And in Iran, it has been that sharks around Iran actually tend to chew on internet cables. It actually happens. So internet gets cut off. There is the intentional slowdown of internet speed. So technically speaking, you can do all of that. But then there is a cost associated with any one of that. I mean, you slow down the internet or cut it off from the outside world. So for example, Gmail is not accessible. That's a cost. So any average Iranian tries to type up gmail.com and sees it's filtered, that's a cost. Right? That's like, it's bleeding for the government. So from a social perspective, that may not really be a possibility. And then just to sort of finish my statements, it's interesting to look at the situation in China. I was just writing down, I'm familiar with these concepts and how they translate into Iranian case, for example, the 50-cent party becomes a $4 party in Iran, and they actually admitted that they are paid to produce content, they're paid, publish posts, put contents, and just put together, false arguments.
That will bring us later to a connection to Russia. We see they also have very similar things.
Yes, yes. I think I'll stop there. I can keep going about Iran. It's very interesting.
We have an hour's time. I'd like to go to Russia because it's a different situation. There we don't have a blocking, a censorship of the internet.
That's amazing.
So what is going on there in Russia, Markus?
Well, I think that's definitely the biggest difference between the Russia and the other two countries, that you don't have official censorship of the media. And if you talk to the now almost again President Putin, he will always point out that the media are free. Everyone can say what they want, and people can go demonstrate. The only problem is that they don't get airtime on state television, which is state-controlled, to present their views. I think Putin himself also, has no problem criticizing the few remaining independent media, like the radio station Echo Moskvy. He says they send diarrhea from morning until evening, and I don't think that that's something that a leading politician in any country that claims to have media freedom would say. I think the big problem, or the main problem, is that the critical mass just hasn't been reached, and that in the protests that have been going on after the parliamentary elections in December and leading up to them, and also now leading up to the presidential elections in March, you see people participating that are part of what some people refer to as the avant-garde of the middle class. That sort of show what might happen in 5 to 10 years on a much larger scale that could then lead to real change. But for the time being, you just have a majority of the population that is either still content with the way things are going, or is too dependent on the state because they get their pensions from the state, they're in the military, to feel, comfortable enough to ask for change. And so if you look at the surveys that came out recently also after the presidential elections, Putin is still supported by a large majority of the population.
So you don't think we're going to see any widespread mass uprising then in the...
Not unless the economic situation really starts changing and takes a turn for the worse.
And not even through the internet, through a more intensified networking of social activists, similar to what is not possible in China and Iran. There it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, and the internet is very prevalent. You have actually, Russia now has the largest number of internet users in Europe. And 43% of the population regularly use the internet, but they're still using it less for political activity and more for social interaction. They're also starting to use it for social causes, but that's still a step away from this political engagement that we were not seeing yet in Russia.
Mr. Löning, the German government has, of course, come out very strongly in recent weeks. We had Azerbaijan, Ukraine has said some statements about human rights. Looking at the situation in these three countries, China, Iran, and Russia, are we seeing an increase in repressive activity at the moment in these three countries?
Well, I would definitely say that in Iran, since the Green Movement, we've seen an incredible increase of repression. We've seen pictures of Evin prison here, which is one of the worst places probably on this earth, where people are tortured and killed every day. And I have myself met people that had just fled Iran. I met them in Turkey, and was this one guy, he was telling me what happened to him and how they shot his friend because they said, well, this last election was falsified, and how he had to flee in the middle of the night. He took his family, and the stories you hear about the brutality of the repression are heartbreaking, and it's really a different Iran now than even 5 years ago. So I think it's very, very bad what is happening in Iran right now. And I think the thing on the internet is just one expression of the absolute paranoia of this regime and the absolute will also to suppress any kind of opposition. So I definitely think that Iran is in a very dark place at the moment. In China, I see there is a lot of repression on political bloggers, on political opposition activists. Then I see more signs of hope also in China. I see bad sides, I see repression, but I see that the activity of people will move things. If I think of this train accident, for example, which they tried to cover up, and then there was so much activity on the Chinese Twitter that they had to look at it. Yep. And you see, so there's more of a, although the situation is bad and there is a lot of very harsh repression, I have a lot more hope that these social issues, the sheer mass of people that are active on the internet will be able to change their country one day. And in Russia, I have very little personal experience, I must say. So it's what I can see is there's, let's say, the political freedoms of opposition groups and so are less than they used to be, and slowly they are taken back. But it's, and personally, I have less hope for a movement of change in Russia because I feel there is a very cynical leadership. And a lot of the young people seemingly leave the country because they find that in other places they can have a better life, and it's easier for them to leave the country and not to work on change in their country. So I don't know where this Russia is going to go.
Well, let me ask you something, because one of the issues is that these courageous voices are suppressed. We saw yesterday, for those of you in the audience who attended some of the sessions, talking about the role that media, social media, this new media ecology plays in connecting people, giving them the sense that they're not alone, that there is a wider community out there, and the fear tactics that the governments employ to suppress that little sense of hope out there. It's so important that that little sense of hope, you said in China there might be possibility, that it is not completely extinguished. What is a possibility, or what are the possibilities for enabling those few courageous voices to come out, to be open? What type of technology can we employ? What can we here, collected here in the middle of Berlin in Germany as bloggers and netizens do to help enable that to come alive? Do any of you want to comment on that, Arash, maybe?
That is a very good question. I mean, that is the key question, because the situation in Iran, as was mentioned, is one of denial of the existence of the dissent voice, right? So the assumption there is that there is a state and there is a population which is in conformity and agreement with the state. And so whoever is saying other things is essentially just a sort of a fringe group and a small group, right? The population is happy. They have their own supreme leader and they essentially worship him in a sense. And so happiness and agreement and all of that, right? So the problem would be if anyone, as my friend Isaac said, would use 140 characters to voice that, hey, I'm not happy. This doesn't make sense, right? So that is dangerous. That's poisonous in such a system. And what the system would do in the society is very much what they do in the Evin prison that you mentioned very correctly. When they arrest someone in Evin, they would put them in solitary confinement. And the reason being for that, to isolate that person. And then they would give him false news about the Green Movement having been crushed and his friends having confessed. And so they would put that person in an imaginary isolation, would tell him, you are the only person who is thinking this way. The rest of the population is essentially finding you insane, right? And through that, they would try to sort of, work that person out of the situation he's in. The same thing happens for the population. The population has to, the regime wants the population to think that there is a state which is good and everyone is happy with it, and you have to be happy with it as well, right? So what they would do, on the other hand, is essentially to sort of talk about this dissent, to talk about other things. There are other possibilities, not only in the political aspects of it, but also the social aspects of it. There are other things that you can do. Internet becomes one of them. The 140-character message is one statement of that. The green band is another statement of that. You would want to wear it to show that, hey, I have an interest in change, and you cannot silence me, right? So you would essentially use any means that you have, whatever small physical or virtual, what it is. To get to the second part of your question, what can be done from the outside? And essentially, I am also in the outside, right? I'm an Iranian, but when I leave Iran and I'm not inside Iran, I have to be very careful what I'm doing, how I'm relating with the people, what is my vocabulary, what am I doing, the concept, and what is my approach, and all of that. We need to be able to find out where these voices are and give them the medium for them to be able to talk. If we have blogs outside Iran, we should allow Iranians inside Iran who would not really be willing to publish the content on their own blog to publish on our blogs, to set up sort of repeating sources, sort of to repeat their message, right? To relay their message. These individual blogs, to put them there, to give them coverage. Bloggers who have left Iran, a lot of them went through Turkey. My friends went through Turkey, a lot of them were shot, a lot of them had significant issues, right? To get them into the mainstream media, the individual, give them a voice and let them be the connecting point between the population.
Okay,
and
you mentioned mainstream media. Mr. Löning, how important is the media in drawing attention to this? What role can the media play? Not just social media, but like you said, mainstream media, that is an important aspect.
Yes. But I'll give two other examples. I'll give the example of Azerbaijan and Ukraine. I mean, you can see how much power these normal media can develop, acting, let's say, on top of social media in highlighting the situation in Azerbaijan now. And a lot of the information that is brought into the mainstream media now comes from social media. I'm, for example, in very close contact with a lot of people in Azerbaijan about the situation, about the real situation, and about how they see the things, and what is published in their media, and translations, and all of that. And it's extremely important to have these, let's say, direct person-to-person connection every day, minute to minute, and to transport that into the mainstream media. And for the first time, I have seen a situation in Germany, at least, that mainstream media look at the country because there is an event there and they highlight the situation of human rights. And that's unprecedented. I think that is really great. And social media have given that a boost simply by providing contacts and information.
Contacts, information, important aspect in China. How do these people get out? How do they get their message out so that the traditional media can latch on to it, can amplify it, can broadcast it essentially to a wider audience?
Yeah, with the fast development of China, economy and the internet were introduced for at least 15 years already. Commercially, and so many people were already connected. And after the censorship system were introduced back to 10 years ago, and people found many ways to try to circumvent the internet, like using different kind of tools invented from United States, from Europe, from some other, even some tools from Iran. And Iran users also use Chinese invented tools.
But we're talking about the individuals. We're not talking about the government, because they share tools too.
Both.
Yeah, so it's from the grassroots layer, definitely. And Chinese users, and we can divide Chinese users into two layers. The first layer we call very savvy internet users. I mean, there are only maybe less than 2% of them back to 2008. But today, just maybe in 4 or 5 years, this number has increased to 10% of those internet users. So they can easily get across the Great Firewall system to access information daily. And they transfer the information from outside world to the inside world. And inside, there are Weibo and social networking, local social networking services, because the international ones has been blocked. So the information dumped into inside users then spread over there, being censored, cut off, whatever. And however, there are still a lot of information exists there, and people try to mention it, talking about it in different ways. So it's a kind of cascade effect back to China. The same way that many Chinese activists, they're using those Twitter, Facebook, by using circumvention tools, talking and conversation with international community, mainstream media, reporters, journalists, etc. And Chinese local media reporters also use those social media tools to mention something cannot be talked, on their mainstream media, coverage. Like recently, a Central Television reporter, he leaked some information that the CCTV, the Central Television, didn't report it on the food safety, and the pharmacy safety issues. And then he was stopped work there, but his messages has been spread all over this country. And the whole country was in a panic. For several days, it directly challenged the authority a lot, because they always try to hide this kind of information to be spread over. And also, I think the international collaboration, like I mentioned, is so important. Some websites was blocked in Iran, some websites were blocked in China, but we all have this kind of communication online. Like 2 years ago, when Iran has the Green Revolution, many Chinese people talk about Iran. They don't talk about China, they talk Iran. They talk Burma. This is always a kind of reflection to educate, to enlighten the people. Under that, the rest of the rest 90% of Chinese people, because we need them. To trigger the future change.
Good. At this point, I see some questions here. Yeah.
I would like to ask.
Do we have a microphone? No. It's a little bit hard.
Hi, my name is Ulrike, and I would like to ask one question regarding this relationship, traditional or mass media and blogosphere whatsoever. If you look at Al Jazeera, or if you look at The Guardian, what they've been doing the last 2 years, they really embraced this blogosphere. They integrated it into their entire news process, and what basically happened, that all of a sudden Al Jazeera became, the #1 channel for US media, what's going on in the Arab world. So there are pretty clear and pretty successful examples out there what can happen if, traditional media embraces netizens and really integrate it into the process of news media. So my question for Isaac and also Arash would be, what happened if you would have something like Al Jazeera for China or for Iran?
Yeah, Al Jazeera is very active reporting China issues, like the recent blind lawyer, case, which is still happening, in China now. This moment, you can see through those timelines, how those grassroots are buzzing this, how those reporters are following this, how those officials, especially U.S. ambassador people, they have a strong team in China using social media to tracking and following people and have conversations there. I think it's very much possible to form a very large community of, new media community, including traditional professional journalists and the amateur journalists. And many people, back to 1 year ago, many people still arguing with me that the Arabic Spring is rather a internet revolution. I would argue it is. Don't ignore the function of internet, a mobile phone, new technologies there. If there's no such a layer, whatever people went to the street, went to the square, there's nobody care about them. There's only one region thing. But instead, we see an international, buzzing about this thing. Everyone, that resonate this kind of information from Arab world to the international. So why don't we admit that?
I think I would have two answers. Number one is, I'm a blogger. I've been blogging for a long time, but professionally speaking, I'm an electrical engineer, a computer scientist, right? So I'm not a journalist. And there have been many examples in Iran that bloggers make mistakes that journalists are trained to not make, right? So at the core of it, a blogger and a journalist are not necessarily the same thing. And so there needs to always be sort of a precaution of how the mixture would work out. Yes, that would be, absolutely, yes. Yes, well, I'm pointing out this to say it's not easy. It's a very complicated task. There have been a lot of examples of in Iran false news being reported and all of that. And then I will go to the second part of my question. Actually, that is happening. You would see with the conventional mainstream media, Deutsche Welle and BBC Persian and Voice of America, they have very good connection with the blogosphere. And you also have news websites. Unfortunately, they're in Persian. We have Mardomak, we have CMail. There are many of them. What they do is that they do their sort of conventional journalist work, and in addition to that, they would have sort of reporting of what's happening in the blogosphere or recreation of blog posts. So that is happening. There are some obstacles for it. How the mixture would look like, how should it be sort of put together, and so that's sort of what makes it hard. But my understanding is it is happening.
Okay. Any other questions, or anybody here on the stage want to answer it? I have one comment I'd like to make too, because it's something you told me earlier, exactly about this issue of getting the word out, spreading words, false information.
Yes.
That it can work on the one hand to get the message out, to alert people to false information printed out by the government, but it can also be turned, and the government can use these channels.
And they do use it. And they do use it. There have been examples of, and it's not exactly interesting, but this could be a topic of subject of a study, how Iranians actually imported this know-how to Syria. So what Iran did, Syria did later. And this is sort of the plan is, you would essentially put together a piece of a news item, which has elements, emotional elements. And in the case of Iran, there's this girl. She has been arrested, she has been raped, and then burned with acid. So the story is very emotional. It catches on. The social networks keeps talking about it. The blogosphere keeps talking about it, and they let the story grow. And after 2 or 3 months, they come out and say and give evidence that would prove that the whole story is wrong. So that's intentional. You would sort of attack the credibility of the social media. This is a tool. This is a method, and then you sort of package this and export this. So sort of as Isaac Mao said, there is a collaboration of bloggers, but there is also this business of suppression. We could call it the suppression industry. It works at the know-how level, at the software level, at the hardware level of selling these methods and tools.
Markus, do you want to comment on that? Does that ring true of some practices in Russia? In a way, maybe. I mean, you definitely have pro-Kremlin bloggers and people out there that are posting in social networks and are trying to sort of back the government. But quite frankly, in Russia, and that might have something to do with the fact that President Putin, or incoming President Putin, is not a big fan of the internet. They just got off to a late start and never really took the internet that seriously, because they concentrated on the mass media like TV, which is still the main source of news for 95% of the population. So you do see there's rumors about people getting paid for posting pro-government blog entries and so, rooting for the party line in social networks, but it's not really big enough to sort of counterbalance the bloggers that are against the government. They, of course, however, unfortunately, don't have enough following from the public to really make a big difference.
There's I'm sorry, Mr. Löning, did you want to?
No, I think it's very interesting, because if we look at the situation in Libya during the war, or now in Syria, is that on one hand, of course, we want any bit of information, especially from a country like Syria or also Iran, because they are so closed off, and every bit of information we can get is useful. But then, of course, it is just someone videoing with his mobile and putting that on TV, and we don't know the source, we don't know the time, we don't know the circumstances, so it obviously can be easily abused. And we have to take that into account. That on one hand, there's a big need for this kind of information, but then that opens up the possibility of course, of falsifying or abusing this kind of information. But I think we will find ways of dealing with that. And there has been this case. I mean, for example, I made a statement on this girl, on this case. I've been fooled too. You know, it happens. But still, it doesn't change anything. We need to go with this. We need to find ways how to deal with the possibility of abuse. Yes, but we shouldn't cut off this source of information because it is so useful to us.
We have a question here from the audience.
What I really want to know is, what is the perspective looking like? So is there the possibility that the regimes just contain their information policy, their censorship policy? And I would really like to know it from the different corners of the regions, so from Russia, Iran, and China. And my second question is, you're working from Canada, Arash, the best Bobs, the best blog from the Bobs competition. He also works from the US now. Yes. So how important is the role of the migration bloggers, so of the bloggers the voices from outside, especially in Iran?
So question number one, the perspective. Just a disclosure, I'm a very optimistic person. End of disclosure. The situation in Iran is grim. A lot of people are being tortured, a lot of individuals in prison, a lot of them had to flee their country, so the situation is very bad. The current situation is very bad, but I think it's going forward. I mean, you cannot push any society down forever, right? So that the society is showing sort of signs of sort of a parallel life being developed. Iran has a very fantastic underground rap music movement. There are concerts underground. So people find their medium. If you filter the internet, if you block the internet, they do it somewhere else. So people sort of do this. But my understanding is that more than the political aspects of the issues, which we always hear in the news, there's a social aspect of it. You want the social, the civic society, the social networks, not the virtual one, not Facebook. The social networks that actually exist, the connections, the interpersonal connections. You want those to grow, and you want sort of the social capital to increase. And I think that's happening in Iran at a very slow pace, under a lot of pressure, but my understanding is that it's happening. To the second question, that is a very good question and at the same time very challenging. So we have Arash, the winner of the best blogs by the Bob's jury. He lives in the US, he's actually a journalist for the mainstream media. So the fact that these individuals are outside Iran, that's a good thing, because just imagine if all of us were inside and no one would actually hear about us, and essentially another North Korea, I assume. So it's good. These nodes of connection have moved outside of the country and can become nodes. But then it is also very important that we, as the people who are outside, actually recognize what we can do and what we cannot do. If we assume that, hey, I just left the country and I am the leader of the movement, right? Everyone please listen to me, then the first thing that happens is that everyone would stop listening to me and would label me as what this person is thinking, right? So when you leave Iran, you have to, one, stay in Iran. I haven't left Iran. I mean, I'm reading Iranian blogs. When I'm writing any post, I have to read it again and again and again. That post has to sound native to an Iranian living in Tehran, in Isfahan, in Yazd, in Shiraz, right? When they look at it, they know I'm in Canada, but they have to be able to identify with me. Not that I'm this person even using English words, right? So it is a very important point. We want to be a node in here for connection, but then understanding who we are and that the population inside Iran change is organic. We cannot impose it. We are sitting down, we have to be aware that we are outside, we do not get a lot of information, what we get is filtered. We want to be helping them. So, put it in short, they are the boss, we are not the boss, right? They tell us what to do and we do it for them.
Okay, Isaac, the situation in China, perspective, what does it look like in the next couple of years, and how important are Chinese bloggers outside of China?
Yeah, there are a lot of, I don't think that anyone, like me, I travel around, back and forth. Anytime I go in China or go out of China, I will be very, beating to worry about if I could be stopped there or whatever. That's everyone, I think that's why China is not a normal country. Definitely we need to move forward. We need to make it normal. to adapt to international standard, in not everything, in one night, but step by step to do this. But I think that the international communication, collaboration is so important. I always emphasize this. From media level, from technology, even from business level, we need to try to get into China and get information out all the time in the bi-directional way, and to try to make Chinese people to understand the world, try to understand what's the human rights norms, everyone, the universal value, that Chinese people are not different from the other people. Yeah, they are the same. But I think that, there are a lot of information we need to break the bridges, break the barriers, like language barriers, for example. There are many German trees, many Chinese trees that didn't discovered by people, from the different size, So we need these kind of bridges to help people to understand what's happening there, and the traditional media need to follow up those kind of real-time happenings instead of report it after 2 weeks, after 2 months, to let the world know. It's totally changed. I mean, the world is in a very dynamic and real-time, changing status, and we need to do many improvements for many, layers of things. So this is kind of something, to China, I can see that no more than maybe 3 years, the censorship system won't work. Whatever they invite, how much money they invested in this system, because many people, they find so many ways to communicate with the outside world. Many people ask me, how about if China cut off the internet? I said, it's okay, let it be. We have many ways to access information. Young people will go to street if they found that their lifestyle has been totally break, So this is something we are very optimistic. The only thing we need to encourage people is to share all the time, not just waiting for something happened and then we started to tell people, oh, is something wrong to me, to my family, whatever. I encourage all those people to become bloggers, to go into social media, to share your cute cat, your flower, your daily meals. It doesn't matter, but once you have something happen, people will have the chance to notice you, to help your voice to be heard. So that's the sharing things.
Markus, in Russia, how does the situation there look? You said 5 to 10 years. We have an open exchange. It's not an issue of getting the information out or finding out what the West is or the other countries are thinking.
I think we'll have to see what happens next week after Putin takes over again. I think there are early signs that there is a tendency towards more control of the internet as well. The Interior Ministry, for example, has set up a department on extremism in electronic media. The police force has been termed a social group, which means that anyone who criticizes the police can be accused of inciting hatred. So these are things that will affect bloggers and could lead to arrests, have led to arrests also in connections with the demonstrations. I think it's difficult to sort of come in from the outside and try and change things there, because that's also used by the government as an excuse to show that the West is trying to tell the Russians what to do, and the government can sort of convince the population that we need to stand up and be proud Russians and not have others tell us what to do. What we try to do at Deutsche Welle Academy is in our projects. For example, right now we're doing a project with traditional journalists, bloggers, and NGO activists about the topic of migration, which is a big issue in Russia, trying to help activists and bloggers find ways to bring their issues into the traditional media as well, and help them find their voice and be able to carry their voice. We'll do the same in a similar project about human rights in a more general setting. I think these are ways for us to help raise these voices in Russia, which of course is not as restrictive as China or Iran. So yeah, but it's not looking too good, I'm afraid.
But I mean, you cannot possibly cut off 1.3 billion people from the rest of the world. That's, I mean, physically impossible. And I mean, your country it's modern, it's growing, it's dynamic. People are moving in and out all the time. I mean, that's impossible. How can you possibly even think of the idea of cutting off all of these people from the rest of the world? And I mean, the same is true for Iran, where I see so many people in exile that are so active and so much in contact and so lobbying for their country. And I mean, it's just it's a crazy idea by these dictators that they believe that they can do that. They haven't understood the concept of the modern world, of, you know, people just being in contact with each other.
That's right. I think the bottom line of the regime to maintain itself is trying to maintain the economy, or maybe something logical to themselves. If they cut off the internet, you know, basically it's a cut off their own self.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea can do it, Burma could do it to some extent, you know, but any country that's bigger than that or that has a more educated population or so, it is simply not possible, because you will cut off your country from any kind of economic development.
That's right.
Questions from the audience? Here's one right up here.
We have one here.
One back there waiting. Oh, sorry.
Hey, my name is Matthias. Thanks, guys, for the great insights. I have a question that Mattis has sort of tackled upon in his last answer, but I would like to hear some more on how Western governments, or what Western governments can effectively do to support free speech in countries like Iran and China and Russia. Because what we hear a lot of times, for example, if Chancellor Merkel, or before that even Chancellor Schröder, was in Russia or in China, they always reminded the governments there that free speech is an important thing, but after that it went on business as usual and nothing really happened. So maybe from Mr. Löning, it would be interesting to hear sort of the German inside view, but also from Isaac, Arash, and maybe Mattis, what, or if there is anything that can be effectively done from the political side.
Okay, well, maybe we address that one to Mr. Löning first, to answer what the German government is doing now.
Well, first of all, I share your frustration, because of course I would wish that if I or if the Chancellor says free speech in China, that then the next day it would happen. I mean, that's what we're all working for. But, and everything you do seems to be too little. On the other side, feedback I get from people that are opposition people, dissident people, they always say it is so important that you raise the subject. I mean, we know you have other issues with our governments, you have economic issues, security issues, what have you, but it is so important that you raise the issue, because it helps us, it protects us in a way. So that part of my work is, for example, I try and visit people that are in jail, which most of the time is difficult, but sometimes it works. I will, when I'm in China, I try to meet opposition people. Sometimes secret police prevents them from meeting me, but I try to do that and to give some support. And I think that making statements may seem, from a Western or from our European perspective, maybe seem ridiculous or so, but it's not. It is important to make statements on these issues, that free speech is important again and again and again. And then, of course, we have the normal tools of our diplomacy, of our foreign policy that we need to use to pressurize people, be it in international fora like the UN. And you don't believe that a person like Mr. Ahmadinejad is impressed by that. But we get feedback again and again, and I get feedback from opposition people from they say, thank you for writing a letter or for raising my issue. I was released from prison because of the international pressure. So I believe we sometimes underestimate the impact words and public statements have that the West is making. But it's never enough. It's important to do it, but it's never enough.
So, more words on that topic. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, here, right up front.
I've got a question for Mattis, because it sounds all a bit black and white how you portray who's the culprit and who's the warrior for freedom of speech and liberties. And I don't know so much about the blogging sphere, so maybe you could tell me about that, how the development isn't there, but the opposition movement, the liberal part is actually quite a small percentage, and there's quite a big rise of ultra-nationalism within the opposition movement, and even Navalny was like connected to ultra-nationalist opposition groups. And I was wondering, I mean, I can see how at the same time the state can use that to say, it's like, oh, we actually have to protect our population because this is ultra-nationalist movement. But then if I look at groups like the National Bolsheviks and their political agenda, sometimes make Putin look like a rather nice person in comparison, if you see what I mean. So I was wondering whether you have data on developments in the blogosphere, or also what your strategy towards these ultra-nationalist movements are. Thank you.
That's definitely a point, and that's as you said, the point that they're using to say we need to control extremism and terrorism and people that are a threat to society. I'm not trying to say that the bloggers are all good and the government is all bad. I'm just saying that you know, as I said before, I think the most basic thing that one has to acknowledge when you look at Russia is that a majority of the population is still happy with their leaders and are not willing to support anyone else. Never mind the fact that there isn't any other leader out there that could get enough backing from the majority of the population. So I'm not sure what kind of
I think
what
that,
we're really looking for in the...
Well, I think that the point was, in Russia, it's not so much of a black and white situation. It's very diffuse, a lot of fine lines there, which makes it so complicated. I think that's basically
what I was trying to say, basically, is that you have, as far as the media is concerned, the traditional media are, by and large, controlled, and you have very little space for dissenting views, which also include these ultra nationalist and extremist views. But you know, there's very little space for the public to form their own opinion, because these dissenting voices aren't really heard. Again, that might also be the problem of the public, that they're not interested in these dissenting views because they have access to the internet and are not trying to find them or are not interested in listening to them.
Okay. Do we have time for more questions? I think so. Any more out there? Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead. If you stand up, a microphone will come to you. Can we get a microphone to her?
The microphone has left.
Sorry, where? Oh.
It's hard to see the lights.
Thank you for your talk. I just wanted to follow up on a question that was raised earlier of what Western governments can do to aid internet oppression. The question that Markus
Sorry,
Löning...
to aid internet oppression?
Sorry, to prevent internet oppression, to combat.
Don't prevent it, please.
What Markus Löning just sketched out seemed to me to be quite passive. With the Ukraine, we've just seen that there are ways of exerting pressure. So again, can you sketch out what would be useful ways to, for example, look at surveillance software, to look at providing infrastructure. What do you think would be helpful from the German perspective, but also from the perspective of people in Iran or China? Thanks.
I'm not a technician, but I believe that if new software or hardware is developed that can also be used for as surveillance, I think it is important that I mean, we are a free country, and if things are not forbidden, they're allowed also for export. So it's important to put these kind of technologies on the dual-use lists, where export needs to be specifically allowed. So I think it is important that these technologies are looked at just like other dual-use technologies that can be used for civil use, but can also be used for repression. And if these new technologies are developed, I believe that that is what needs to happen. But something else also needs to happen, and of course it's good to call for the government and for a legal framework, but I think it's also very important that Western societies call on the responsibility of their stakeholders, and big companies like, I don't know, Siemens, Nokia, whoever you're talking about, are stakeholders of these societies, and I believe they need to be called for their responsibility. They are not living on the moon, and if they're living in in our free societies, and they have a responsibility with their products. And I don't quite understand why the situation on Ukraine is passive. I think that there's a very good movement at the moment, a lot of attention, and I think there's a very active momentum at the moment concerning Ukraine. It's not what, okay.
Okay, so issue of software. Yes, the software that is sorry? Oh, oh, okay.
Yeah, we're a bit in a hurry, I'm sorry. I'm the bad guy right now.
Yes, okay. Well, let me just give a couple of closing statements then. I'm sorry?
You know more about these issues than I do.
Yes, I do, and that would be really grounds for a whole new conversation if we had the time. Because it is interesting, the role that technology on the one hand plays in a useful sense of helping people to use the internet better, but also can be turned around and used on the negative side to monitor what's going on. And we know from speaking that often this technology of suppression is a very valuable commodity on the market among dictators, and is passed from China to Iran to now Syria. North Korea is probably involved, and who knows else down the line. So it's definitely important for us to be aware of what's going on there, and I'm convinced to also remain in contact with those individual voices, those courageous people who are standing up and speaking with a voice of dissent, because if we can connect to them, and conferences like Republica are a great opportunity for that, I think, and then having the government also give words of reminding people what we need to do, come out on freedom of expression, freedom of speech is also very important. So I think to basically remain aware, to remain connected, and to remain vigilant then also of those abuses is really important here. So I thank you all for coming. Arash, Isaac, Mathis, and Herr Löning, Mr. Löning, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.